Hi everyone, this is Matthew Janner for Card Runners, and I'm here with the second part of my Quickie series, where I talk about how to defend against 3-bets on the button using a variety of different raise first in frequencies on the button. We're going to have a quick Quickie review. We are experimenting with how the button must defend against 3-bets with different preflop raise opening frequencies. A few notes. We are assuming the opponent c-bets half pot on all flops. This is the most common 3-bet pot sizing by far. So while it's pretty much true in theory your opponent would have a different raise sizing based on the flop texture for all 3-bet pots, for the most part people are going to bet right around 1/2 pot so they can get all the money in by the river, betting pretty close to an equal fraction. So in a 3-bet pot, if you bet just about half pot on the flop, turn, and river, you get all the money in, so that's the most common sizing people will use by far. We are assuming the 3-bet came from the big blind. In reality, the defending range against a small blind and big blind 3-bet are incredibly similar. So, once again, even though we're using the same defending range here, we only made one because we assumed the big blind was always the player 3-betting. For the most part, you can use this whether or not it's the small blind or the big blind that 3-bet. The small blind will have a slightly stronger range since the small blind will flat less. So since the small blind flats less, it can use better hands to 3-bet bluff. For example, the big blind might call with a hand like 8-10 suited, whereas the small blind will 3-bet bluff it. So the big blind will have to 3-bet bluff a worse hand. But for the most part, you're going to be able to use the same range whether or not it's the small blind or the big blind that 3-bet. You just have to tweak it a tiny bit. And since we are using different button opening frequencies, these are not all the standard ranges I'm used to defending. You'll get to see me try to figure out how to defend on random flops using ratios and frequencies we've previously discussed. So that's of course one of the big advantages about knowing theory, is you can take concepts you've already learned and apply them to new opening ranges or even entirely new games. Most theoretical concepts work in a lot of different spots, including even different forms of poker, so of course they work for different opening ranges. Since we used a 35% raise first in range on the button, we are using a 13.4% flatting range and 4-betting jacks and better and ace-king for value. So nothing new there. We will most likely spend the entire Quickie with this range, then make a new wider button opening range for the next Quickie. Even if you don't use this range, remember some very aggressive cutoff openers do and you will learn how to attack them. So that's the whole point of this video series, is to explore how different opening ranges must defend against a 3-bet, because to be honest, a 35% open range in the button I think is way too tight. Nevertheless, there are some people that are very tight and they open the button with that range, or they're very loose and they open the cutoff with that range. So it's still very useful to know how this range kind of needs to respond to 3-bets so we can, exploit and attack our opponents who do use that range. And now we are off to Flopzilla. So, here was our defending range. We are going to go ahead and just randomly generate some flops and talk about how to defend them. So, here we go. 10-3-3 rainbow. This is going to be an absolute nightmare to defend, because we do not have any trips, and our opponent probably doesn't have much. He might be able to have 3-4 suited or ace-3 suited, but he probably flats ace-3 suited pre-flop, and 3-4 suited he may or may not 3-bet bluff. But overpairs are pretty much going to be awesome on this board. We don't have any, and our opponent has aces, kings, queens, and jacks. So this to me is one of those kind of like textbook examples of a flop where I don't think we're going to be able to defend enough. So if we have 166 combos in our range, and we are going to have a very wide range here since we made such few pairs, we would need to defend 116 combos. So desired combos defended. We want to defend 116, so we can't bet any 2 cards, but that doesn't look like it's going to be possible. It looks like this is a board where our opponent can probably bet anything, but we'll go ahead and look. So 3 of hearts, 3 of clubs, 10 of diamonds. Alright, so let's go ahead and just start off with calling the best hands we can think of. Ace-10 is not going to work well as a value raise here, and of course we can slow play a hand like pocket 10s. There's no reason to raise now. We'd much rather call and delay the raise. Alright, so here we go. So top pair. Alright, so let's just start with pocket pairs below top pair. So I'm just going to write call with 6-6 plus. Was that it? Or was it a little bit stronger? Pocket pair. Yeah, 6-6 plus. So 6-6 plus is 54 combos. I usually like to write out all the combos, but since it is a Quickie, we're going to try to go a little bit faster. Alright, and then now we have to defend another 62 if we want to defend enough so our opponent can't bet anything. But I don't think we're going to get there. So let's go ahead and look. What else can we call with? Well, we can very clearly call with ace-queen. Ace-queen's pretty good. That's 16 more combos. We could call with king-queen for 16 more combos. We could call with ace-jack for 16 more combos if we really wanted to. So that would get us to that. So I'm going to write little bracket here, 54 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16, that's 48 plus 54, that should be 102 if I'm not mistaken. All right, and we would need to defend with 14 more combos, so we maybe can defend with King Jack suited, that'll be 3 more combos. Queen Jack suited, that'll be 3 more combos. So yeah, the reason why I put suited for 3 is the backdoor flush draw. Trying to think if there's anything else. Maybe Jack 9 suited with 3 more combos that can turn some open-ended straight draws. And that would get us to 111. So we would still need to defend with 5 more. Yeah, this isn't really looking very good. So as I was already mentioning, I didn't think we'd be able to defend enough on this flop. I think we're already starting to really push it with using all these combos. I think Ace-Queen you can pretty clearly call with. Ace-Jack and King-Queen you can probably call with most, if not all, the combos. But once we start getting to like Jack-9, with the backdoor, with just the backdoor flush draw and backdoor straight draw, and if we wanted to get even wider than that with like 9-8 suited, we wouldn't even have an overcard. I think we're at that point defending too wide, and we just have to acknowledge this was a bad flop for us. We're going to have to fold too much. So I'm going to go ahead and put this for equal 111. Desired combos defended, or total combos defended was 111 despite wanting to defend 116. I would not really recommend calling wider than this. So even though our goal is usually to make our opponent unable to bet any 2 cards, I don't think I'm going to try to do that here. Alright, so that was a bit of a bummer. Let's randomly generate another one. 6-5-2 two-tone. Once again, not a good flop for our range. A lot of people think this is a much better flop than it is, and I will show you why in just one moment. Alright, so total combos is once again going to be a ridiculously high amount because we just simply didn't make any pairs. So it's 173 combos times 0.6. That'll get us to 104. So 173... total combos 173. Desired combos defended. Just made a mistake, which you don't want to make. It's a 3-bet pot, so people bet less. So it's not 0.6 like it often is in a raise pot. It's 0.7. So we need to defend 121 combos. We are once again going to be shown a flop where we cannot defend this wide. We happen to get 2 very bad flops where overpairs just kind of completely own. And even though we can have some strong hands on this board, we only have 3 combos of sets. So our opponent probably has pocket 5s and pocket 2s, or at least pocket 2s that he 3-bet bluffed. So this is just not a board that we are going to be able to defend well when our opponent has just as many, if not more, sets than us, and a bunch of overpairs. So we're in bad shape here. Alright, so let's start off with what we can value raise, what we can call. Once again, not going to value raise anything. The only hand here that would be strong enough to value raise would be pocket 6s, and we're going to be better off slow playing it most likely. A 4 or a 3 are not all that scary in a 3-bet pot. He'll once in a while have a straight, but it's not going to be all that common. So I would value raise nothing. Let's start with what we can call. So we can call with, let's just start with any pair. Weak pair, 19%. This range is so bad. Okay. Sorry, the range isn't bad. This flop is so bad. Alright, so weak pair is 33 combos. Call. Weak pair. I'll put weak. WP. 33 combos. And now we have to start calling with a bunch of other stuff. Flush draws, 17 combos. That one's pretty good, actually. Flush draw, 17. So we're at 50 combos right now, and we have 71 more to go. So just coincidentally, we got 2 really bad flops to start us out. So let's go ahead and defend with all of our ace-queen. That'll be 16 more. Let's go ahead and defend with all of our king-queen, I guess. That's 16 more. Ace-jack, 16 more. I mean, we're really pushing it even already. I think trying to flat on this board with ace-jack without a backdoor flush draw. So I just think this flop completely whiffs our range, and I would just be giving up a ton here. If our opponent wants to bet any 2 cards here, he's very clearly going to be able to do it, because also think about it for a moment. What hands can our opponent really have that aren't already like good value hands or aren't going to make decent bluffs? If our opponent was bluffing pre-flop, he probably connected really well on this board texture, right? People usually 3-bet bluff stuff like really, really low pocket pairs that they can't call with, or suited connectors, or suited gappers. All that stuff connected here, and then if he was value 3-betting, he's going to usually have ace-queen or ace-king, and those hands are going to have a ton of outs, and if a turn does come queen and our opponent has ace-queen, he knows he's nutted. So, this board makes his overpairs awesome, and when he was 3-bet bluffing, he now has awesome semi-bluffs to go with his hands like ace-king and ace-queen, which are sort of bluffs. So, this board just completely sucks, and we're really just going to have to fold a ridiculous amount here. So if we defended all that, we'd be at 98, and we're still way too short, and I think these hands are still too weak. So we're not going to be able to defend enough. I would just defend all ace-queen combos. I would defend something like king-queen 7, which means king-queen with the backdoor flush draw. So king-queen with either the king or queen of spades or king-queen of diamonds. Probably the same deal with ace-jack, defend the ones with the backdoor flush draws. Maybe the same deal with king-jack to defend the ones with the backdoor flush draws. I'd rather have the backdoor flush draw with king-jack than king-queen without the backdoor flush draw, most likely. Our opponent, or we can at least defend with straight draws and stuff here, so let's look at that. We have 8-7 suited, which will be 3. We already have the flush draw counter. We don't want to double count that. 9-8 suited, which will be 3. Alright, so that pretty much is it. I'm just going to look for one more second. And I just added in queen jack of diamonds, queen 10 of diamonds, king 10 of diamonds, which gives me 3, and then ace 10 4, which to me means ace of spades 10x or ace of diamonds 10 of diamonds. So let's see what that gave us total. I had marked down 100 combos, but I also just noticed this should only be 99 because otherwise I'm double counting the flush draw with ace queen. So 99 combos. This would be around what I would probably look to defend. You're really going to want to look at your opponent's stats and see if you actually have to defend this wide. But when you do notice something like this, you should think to yourself, okay, now why am I having so much trouble defending on this flop? Is it just because I'm a post-flop nit? Is it because this flop is much better for his range than mine? Am I opening too wide pre-flop and then I'm not going to be able to defend enough against 3-bets? And I think when you really stop and think about what we've done and you look at this flop texture, this is just a case of the flop being really bad for our range and there's not a lot we can do. We just got unlucky to get this flop. So I'm only going to defend here 99 out of the 121 combos we wanted to, so my opponent can definitely bet any 2 cards here and make a profit. Alright, so here we go. Queen 7-2 rainbow. So this flop's much better for our range than the previous ones. Queen high flops in general hit the 3-bet calling range much better than the 3-betting range. This one isn't as bad for the 3-betting range as it usually will be because our opponent's often going to be 3-betting ace-queen for value against a button open. But for the most part, when people get 3-bet and they're in the cutoff or the button, they're always going to have like ace-queen off, king-queen off. In this case, we even have queen-jack off. So this is a lot of really good pairs that are in our range, which make this board much more easy to defend than it would usually be if the board was like 10 high, where we could only have ace-10 off, or king high, where we don't have ace-king off. So, pretty good flop for us. People do see bet this board way too wide in general, so we're definitely going to be able to defend enough here to not let him bet any 2 cards. So 160 combos times 0.7, that's going to be 112 combos that we need to defend. Alright. Now, I don't think you're going to need to raise ace-queen on this flop. You could do it and balance it out with bluffs, but I think you're better off just calling with it because, once again, it's very easy to get all the money in by the river in a 3-bet pot. So I would value raise nothing. And then I would call with, well, let's go ahead and just get started with middle pair or better. That's going to be 66 combos. So middle pair plus is going to be 66 combos. And let's see what other, I think that's all the pairs we actually can have. Where are the weak pairs? Okay, so weak pairs just adding in pocket 6s. So we don't really need to, worry about that. So sorry, this should be, yeah, that's 66 combos for middle pair plus. Okay, so what else do we have? Anything very useful? There's no real straight draws here. So at this point, it might look like, oh man, it's going to be really hard to defend enough because we only have, defended 66 out of 112 combos and we're out of pairs. But for the most part, you're just going to have to float a lot on this flop and you're going to be able to, get rid of those bluffs that can't show down by the river by value betting hands like ace-queen and queen-king on the turn in the river and then, firing out with all your bluffs to make them fold better. Alright, so a hand like ace-jack we can probably float with, so that will get us another, 16 combos. We're probably mostly going to want to use suited hands, but I think ace-jack's just strong enough that we can probably call with all those at first. Maybe we'll need to remove it at the end. And then we're just going to do a lot of this kind of stuff, like king 10 suited 3. That just means we're calling with king 10 suited with the backdoor flush draw. Ace 10 suited 3. Ace 9 suited 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug all these in right now, since we are doing a quickie, and you'll see it in just a moment. So through the magic of editing, we've added in these hands and gotten to 112 combos, and there are some things I want to briefly point out. The first is you want to make sure when you're fighting with hands, you're not fighting with too many hands that are going to have to be turned into bluffs, and you're also fighting, when you are fighting with hands that are going to, be able to bluff and balance out your value bets, you want to make sure those are the type of hands that can improve. So for example, we might want to flat with all of our ace-jack combos, because that hand might be strong enough to check down and win here without being turned into a bluff. Whereas a hand like 10-9 of clubs, or sorry, let's do 8-9 of clubs, a hand like 8-9 of clubs, you can see how this hand right here lets you runner a lot of very interesting hands. You could first of all just straight up turn a pair of 8s or a pair of 9s. You could turn the open-ended straight draw with a 10 or a 6, and any club will give you a flush draw. So that's why a lot of really good players who don't fold a lot probably seem like they're luckier than they are. There's a big difference here between flatting something like 8-9 of clubs or just flatting a completely useless hand because you think, oh, I can float him here. So, whereas it is okay to float people very wide exploitatively, if you are playing against someone good, be sure when you are calling or when you are bluff raising, you try to randomize with the right types of hands that both give you an overall balanced range. And if you know the hand's going to be turned into a bluff if it doesn't improve, just make sure it's a hand that can pretty reasonably improve, like 8-9 of clubs. So that's all the time we have for today. And I hope one thing you took out of these videos was to realize how hard it often is to defend with an opening range on some flops and 3-bet pots. So we got particularly tough flops today, but there are a lot of board textures where if you haven't ever actually really played around with your entire range, you're not going to realize you're folding way more than you probably think you are because your opponent is getting such a cheap price with his bluff and you have to defend so wide. So that's one thing that's probably really good to focus on, is to really think, am I folding too wide on this flop? Am I floating enough on the flop? Am I floating enough on the turn when my opponent is making small bets? And obviously it's much easier to figure that out if you're looking at your entire range rather than if you're playing one specific hand at a time where you might just not notice you're folding as much as you are. So thanks for watching, everyone. Good luck at the tables, and I'll look forward to reading your responses in the forums. Bye.
Want to see your hands in the quickie? Convert your hand history using the CR converter or post it in the forums. Send your link or questions to thequickie@cardrunners.com. Please include all relevant reads, stats, and information. The more info you provide, the more likely you'll be selected.